Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the 305. Hopefully, the world's first podcast dedicated to the Criterion Collection. But of course, not the Criterion Collection that you're all familiar with, which is the extremely expensive Blu-rays and DVDs, but the original Criterion Collection, which was featured on Laserdisc. If you're not familiar with Laserdisc, these were 12-inch movie discs, essentially giant DVDs that could hold about an hour of video per side, depending on the format, and were released from the 70s until right around 2000. Criterion got their start here in 1984 and went until 1999. 305 is a reference to the number of movies in the Laserdisc collection. They did number all of their releases by spine, and if you look into this, you will know that they went from 1 to 384, but because of various re-releases, the actual number of unique titles is about 305. Starting with Citizen Kane as number 1, and going all the way to Armageddon, that classic of contemporary cinema, in 1999. And I can tell you that the Criterion Collection's mission statement is that they have been dedicated to publishing important classic and contemporary films from around the world in editions that offer the highest technical quality and award-winning original supplements. They were, in fact, the first people to start adding special features to home video releases. They championed the director's commentary format by utilizing the multiple audio tracks available on Laserdisc, and also adding things like original trailers, film critical analyses, special behind-the-scenes footage and stills, documentaries, the works.
And you are?
And my lonely self am Jonathan Irons. I am a hobbyist film critic. I did work in film and TV for about 10 years in Los Angeles, especially in stop-motion animation. And as will happen every episode, I have a guest with me. This time it is Theron Seckington Philgreen, the world's foremost authority in training on zombie films.
So we're watching today we're watching the Night of the Living Dead of regular cinema.
Yes, which is of course Criterion number 1, Citizen Kane. And I am cheating a little bit because this was actually releases both number 1 and number 142 for a 50th anniversary edition. I'm using the 142 just because it contains all of the special features from the earlier editions. This movie was released in originally 1941 by Orson Welles, widely regarded as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. It featured Orson Welles himself as the man Charles Foster Kane, as well as the Mercury actors. That was his stable of actors from his theater and radio play days. And that included Joseph Cotton, Dorothy Comingore, Everett Sloane, Ray Collins, George Coulouris, Agnes Moorehead, Ruth Warwick, Erskine Sanford, and William Allen. It was also written by both Orson Welles and Herman K. Mankiewicz, which I'll talk about a little later, and has been regarded as one of the greatest films of all time practically since it came out. It was 5 times voted by international critics in the BFI Sight and Sound poll as the best film of all time in 1962, 1972, 1982, 1992, and 2002, before finally in 2012 it was beaten by Vertigo.
So we're here to see if it holds up.
Yes, surely in 2020 it can't possibly be.
In a post Mad Max Fury Road world, who's to say?
Now, I did want to give a little bit of context here. When this movie first came out, it was critically successful, but actually failed at the box office. It did not even manage to make its own money back.
Do you know what the budget was?
It was right around...
It was like $30 or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like 800,000.
What is that adjusted for inflation, I wonder?
Yeah, that's a good question. let's see, they originally needed it to be a $500,000 budget. That was what RKO gave Orson Welles. He blew past that. Absolutely.
He spent that on the first day.
Yeah, practically. Well, he had 2 failed attempts to get a movie made with RKO before this. They had sought him out after his fame and publicity following the War of the Worlds podcast, or 1930s podcast. And he had tried 2 separate films.
By the way, that's about $15 million in today money.
Ah, thank you. That's a lot of money for the time, I suppose, for a brand new director.
Yeah, but it's like you could barely make an independent film on that today. Which
yeah.
Which I guess this kind of was.
So what happened was he tried to make 2 films, one of them being Heart of Darkness. Couldn't get it off the ground for various reasons. And when he got to Citizen Kane, he didn't want to let anybody in on it. He started shooting in secret by claiming it was a series of test shoots. And he essentially shot supposed tests for a month when really he was just shooting the first scenes of Citizen Kane, and used that in order to essentially avoid any interference by the studio and get what he wanted before taking it to them and saying, look, here's what I've actually got. Please let me proceed without you guys mucking this up again. So, for instance, his test budget was technically $528 for the first scene, and he managed to overgo even that by shooting for $809 to create the first scene of everybody sitting in the darkness watching the newsreel. But so this film got released. It didn't make its money back, which is, of course, very disappointing to Welles himself. And he went on to basically try to prove to everybody for the rest of his career that he was, in fact, amazing and could shoot a commercial picture.
I don't even know if there was $15 million in the world in 1941.
Yeah, that, of course, everything was going into aluminum for the war effort.
Or aluminium, if you're listening across the pond.
Yeah. But so, since then, it continued to have critical success, and is still, if you go to film school, it's still brought up constantly as the greatest movie. This is what people study. And the last thing I will bring up is that, while I was reading about it, so Pauline Kael, who was, aside from, say, Roger Ebert, one of the most famous and well-regarded film critics in history, she wrote a very famous book-length essay in 1972 called Raising Kane. And this was used as the introduction to a printing of the script for Citizen Kane. And in this essay, she proposed that Orson Welles actually had nothing to do with the script and had essentially stolen it from his co-writer Mankiewicz and tried to claim everything for himself.
Now, I was going to say that is interesting because knowing what I do about Welles, I wouldn't put that past him. I'm not sure if I believe that, but I wouldn't put that past him.
Right. Yeah. If you know anything about Welles, that would fit.
Tremendous con artist. In addition to a great actor.
So, she had reason to believe that this was true, and interviewed a number of people, got some original research from a colleague of hers, and wrote this explosive, expose to say, Orson Welles was actually a hack this whole time. Really, it was Mankiewicz who had come up with this amazing film. It was received with some notoriety when it came out, which I would love to talk about after we watch the film, because it does add some interesting color to the movie itself, I would say. But so the idea behind this podcast is that we will be doing these introductions. We will both be watching the movie then as fresh as possible, so you, the audience, are free to watch it yourself during the break, and then we will come back.
We're going to insert a 2-hour break into the podcast.
Complete silence. Yeah.
You'll hear us coughing once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll come back and discuss the film, talk about our impressions of it, some more tidbits about the making and the outcome of the movie, and then whether we think it really belongs in the Criterion collection, whether it should be considered an important classic or contemporary film. But I guess the last thing before we launch into this, how familiar are you with Citizen Kane?
I've seen it.
Okay.
Quite a while ago, but I've seen it. In high school, I was trying to become like a serious film guy. So I watched a bunch of serious films. This was among them. I don't remember much about it. This movie sort of creates its own context, kind of similar to like The Godfather in that regard, I would say, and that people widely consider it one of the best. So it's hard to watch without that. So I do want to see, like, is this one of the best movies of all time? Its influence on other filmmakers can't be doubted, because so many people have said in interviews, like, Citizen Kane really inspired me to do this or to enter the industry at all. Mm-hmm. But is it one of the best? I don't know. Let's find out.
That's a good way to put it. Just like, a lot of movies, if you didn't see them on original release, it may be difficult for the movie to live up to the hype that everybody has heard since then.
Yeah, I mean, he invented things like moving the camera, which are things that we sort of take for, it's like, it's innovation at the time is, of course, can't be overstated, but
definitely.
How well does Citizen Kane hold up in an industry that has thrived since Citizen Kane came out? Like, do people improve on the stuff he innovated here, or I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we will pause the recording here.
Yeah. And you do this. Pause your recording and go watch Citizen Kane real quick.
All right. We'll be right back.
The arrival of video discs was received with much ballyhoo on the part of producers in recent years, and with very little acceptance on the part of the consumer. Now there is new hope for success. Leonard Maltin has that story.
King Kong has good reason to be upset. In the more than 50 years since his film was made, many prints and even negatives have become badly worn and damaged. The old ape could do nothing more than stand by and swallow it. But this print is in remarkable shape, and there's a reason for that. Thanks to a Los Angeles-based company called Criterion, King Kong of the 30s has found his way onto Laserdisc of the 80s.
That's right. After you finish this episode, you can look for episode 2 of the 305, Marion C. Cooper's 1933 special effects classic, King Kong. All right, and welcome back, everybody. We just finished watching Citizen Kane.
And hopefully so did you.
Yeah, ideally. So, Theron, as world's foremost authority in training on zombie films, what do you think? How does it hold up?
Disappointed that there are no zombies or supernatural elements whatsoever.
Yes, understandable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like a jerk here. Like, when I say technically it's very good, I don't find the story all that compelling. It's just kind of like, I've sort of seen that rise and fall narrative a million times, and there's kind of only one way that plays out. But like, technically it's very good. Every element is in place. It's a really great piece of visual storytelling.
Definitely. Well, and technically, multiple categories came in to really like help the story forward. You got the cinematography, the set design, the costume design, the makeup design, the music. Like, all of those things were definitely in place.
Yeah, the cast is great.
Who did you have a favorite aside from Orson Welles?
It's pretty much Orson Welles. I'm a big fan of Joe Cotton and everything he's in. I think he never gets enough screen time. On just about anything except The Third Man, and he's the protagonist. So
yeah, he definitely looked like, I can imagine that he was having fun during the production playing this foil to Orson Welles. Mm-hmm. Especially stabbing him in the back later.
That's interesting that you say that.
Why is that?
I don't interpret that as his betrayal. I feel like that's Kane's betrayal.
Okay. And Leland's essentially like revenge for the betrayal? I mean, I'm thinking about the article that he wrote.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a... Well, should we do a plot synopsis?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
And then we can pick apart individual plot points.
Yeah, so this movie is, I think of it essentially like a fake biopic. It's definitely got all the elements of that. We follow a larger-than-life character from childhood to his death, and all of his accomplishments, his failures, his many loves, etc. And in this case, it's told through the plot device of newsmen trying to sort of reconstruct his life after he's died by interviewing a number of people associated with him over the years and getting their takes on various events in Kane's life.
All in service of making sense of his last words, which were, of course, Rosebud.
Yes, very enigmatic. And so there's a lot of, it's an unusual plot structure in some ways because it does a lot of cutting back and forth in time. So you see his death first, then you get like the newsreel clips of various points in his life, then you get his childhood, then it goes back to old age, young age again, and so on. And so you're sort of haphazardly learning about various episodes in Kane's life. I guess I should mention as a boy, he is sent away to a really fancy school for education when his family discovers a gold mine on the property. And after he grows up, he ends up deciding to get into the newspaper business. And of course, this is all based on William Randolph Hearst, largely. And there are a lot of very obvious details pulled from Hearst's real life. Theron, was there anything else you wanted to add to the synopsis that you thought was important?
No, just it's a steady sort of sense of decay through the movie. Like, even though it cuts around at different times, he's older or younger, he is largely getting older throughout the I almost called it a game, throughout the the movie, and then sort of falling into moral decay at the same time. It's kind of like, I guess, Barry Lyndon is the other film I can think of that is also about ceilings, and that is also about this kind of rise and fall.
Yeah, that is a good example.
The greater his fortune, the less moral he becomes.
Right. I thought there were a couple of quotes in the movie that stuck out to me as being particularly striking in regards to sort of what this movie might be about, or at least more about the character of Kane. And the first one was Kane in his old age, and he's talking to the bankers when they were, he's selling off his newspaper business, I believe. And he says, if I hadn't had any money, I might have become a great man. And the banker asks him, you don't think you were a great man? And he responds, I think I did pretty well under the circumstances. Well, what would you like to have been? And he just responds, everything you hate. Which I think is an interesting, it's not immediately obvious what he means by that.
Well, I mean, because it cuts to him as a young newspaper man very shortly after that, right? And that banker who was his, friend and mentor for many years. What's that character's name again?
Bernstein.
No, that's Thacker.
Oh, yeah. Shoot, what is his name? The one who takes him in as a kid, right?
Yeah, I think it's Thatch. Boy, we definitely watched that movie and did not sit around for 2 hours making jokes.
Thatcher. Walter Parks Thatcher.
Yeah, Thatcher. No, Thatcher accuses him a lot of times of not being serious enough or not being financially minded. He even says something to the effect of, he never made investments with his money. He just bought things.
Yeah.
So they have very different ideas of what money is for.
Mm-hmm.
Thatcher seems to think the point of money is to get more money. Bernstein seems to feel sort of the same way. And Kane, of course, thinks that the point of money is to buy people's love. So,
yes, which he tries multiple times.
Tries and fails every time, yes.
Yeah. The line that I really liked was the main investigator in the movie. He goes to visit Kane's friend Jedediah in the hospital, or sort of, it seems almost like a nursing home, and asks him about Kane's life, and Jedediah says, not that Charlie is ever brutal, he just did brutal things. Which was a fascinating remark about, can a person be summed up as evil, or do they just do evil things sometimes?
Well, it's sort of like what The Great Gatsby says about Tom, that they just smash people to pieces and they just don't care.
Yeah, he does seem to be driven. He doesn't really seem to ever have empathy. in
well, no,
any
because
obvious way.
that's outwards, that's
Right.
outwards looking, and he's a very inwards looking person,
Mm-hmm.
and he just wants everyone to love him and to be seen as perfect all the time.
Yeah.
What's the big deal? Why can't you simply love and adore him?
He's so witty. I mean, how couldn't you?
He's such a charmer.
Yeah.
I was going to say, which is why Wells is such a great choice for that role, because that's him essentially. He just wants people to love him forever, and then once he found out he couldn't do that, he also sort of fell into decay in the last few decades of his life.
Well, and you mentioned earlier Wells being a great con man.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I like that you said that, because I think a lot of directors have a pretty consistent theme that they return to over and over again in their movies. Mm-hmm. And I think for Wells, it is the con. Most of his movies are about the nature of truth, about deceit, playing a part in some way.
Yeah, well, I feel like that comes out of his preoccupation with magic. Wells was also a magician, if you weren't aware, and if you are aware, awesome. So he was also a magician, and I think getting people to buy into something before you pull the rug out from under them, like that, the prestige, to borrow a term from another movie. That moment when you can look around the room and see that you fooled everybody, I think, is what he was always chasing.
Yeah, definitely. And even from a theatrical background as well, I think he really enjoyed the sort of the art of playing pretend. And it just seems like that comes up in a number of his work, even back to the beginning, like War of the Worlds being one of the famous examples of, using theater to pull one over on people.
Yeah, the framing device of, this is actually happening, of
yeah.
the news broadcast.
Yeah. And then actually later in this series, we'll be watching a documentary that he made later in life called F for Fake, that he quite literally breaks down his fascination with theater and magic and deceit and all those sorts of ideas. And he does it in a very bizarre, sort of experimental documentary way.
Yeah.
And then plot-wise, I guess the last thing that caught me was the main investigator. He's explaining to the newspaper people about what he found out, and the other woman asks him about Rosebud, and he says, "No, I never figured out what that meant." And anyway, it wouldn't explain anything. I don't think any word can explain a man's life.
But it does.
Yeah, there's that long panning shot, and they go right into the workers.
The long panning shot over the scary warehouse from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, they pass by the Ark of the Covenant, of course, and then frame up on Rosebud the sled, which is then thrown into the fire. But I think that's an interesting last sort of final line, because to me, I can see Rosebud the sled being a sort of misdirection in terms of like asking the audience, can you really say that this man's entire life boiled down to him being a dissatisfied child whose happiness was taken away at a young age, or are there more layers to this man's life that can't be so easily explained?
Would he have been unhappy without wealth just as easily?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, there's something to that. But we never saw the companion piece of Citizen Kane 2. This time he didn't have money.
That was yet another one of Orson Welles' failed projects.
he had several. Citizen Kane 2, Kane Harder.
Yeah. Now, of course, there were...
Citizen Kane 3, The Secret of the Ooze.
That was actually the one where they go back to feudal Japan, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
Reading about the movie, a number of theories as to, whether Rosebud had any alternate meanings. And, of course, one of the most popular ones was that since this movie was based on William Randolph Hearst, that Rosebud actually referred to a certain part of his mistress's anatomy that he was particularly fond of.
Her brain. Because
yes, absolutely.
He loved her mind.
Tiny pink brain.
That's the goof we landed on. Sorry. You pays your money, you takes your chances.
Yep. Well, so speaking of Hearst, I mentioned Pauline Kael's very long essay about the creation of the script for this movie, and so as it turns out, Herman Mankiewicz, he was a screenwriter and producer in Hollywood already before Orson Welles, and he was actually mostly a comedy writer and produced uncredited a number of early Marx Brothers movies, like Horse Feathers and Duck Soup.
Oh.
He'd come from New York to Los Angeles with a number of his New York writing friends, like Ben Hecht, and he helped create this very witty, fast-paced style for the talkies that came to be like the new style in American movies. It was very like the thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up meeting a man named Charles Lederer, who introduced him to Marion Davies, who was in fact Hearst's mistress. And so, just sort of like through a friend of a friend, essentially, Mankiewicz ended up meeting Hearst and hanging out at his grand mansion, having dinner, trading stories, all that kind of stuff. And just, found him to be amazingly awful and ridiculous, and started writing this idea of a movie about Hearst's life. And then he worked on a radio program, I believe, a CBS program with Orson Welles, and so they got to know each other. And then Orson Welles visited Mankiewicz in the hospital because I think he had broken his leg or something like that, and they ended up talking about this concept of Hearst, and I think Orson Welles had already had some similar ideas, so they started developing this script together. And what appears to have happened is that they each wrote their own drafts of the movie, and then Welles took Mankiewicz's draft and chopped everything up, rearranged scenes, inserted his own lines, and sort of created what we now know as the movie. And the reason that I said that Pauline Kael's article was not particularly well received by some people was that she had made the claim that Mankiewicz had literally written everything and that Welles had never written a word of it. And Mankiewicz himself even perpetuated this idea. There was a lot of arguing when the movie came out about who was going to get credit for screenwriting, stuff like that. And as it turns out, Kael had actually failed to interview Orson Welles himself or anybody around Orson Welles, like his assistants or anybody else who worked on the movie. She simply took Mankiewicz's word as gold and a couple of people around him and went out and published this.
Well, now that's interesting because it would kind of be like a my word against yours situation, right?
Yes, in some ways, but essentially she pissed some people off who were friends of Orson Welles, like Peter Bogdanovich, who famously worked with Welles throughout his life, and other people then went and did that kind of background digging and were able to at least come up with supporting evidence that Orson Welles had in fact written his own draft and that there had been a lot of mixing and matching of pieces separate from Orson Welles' claims himself. And it was a hot thing for a moment in 1972, and then it kind of died down and people forgot about it until several years ago, I think it was like 2011, that it was somebody wrote about it again, and everyone was sort of shocked to remember, like, oh wow, that happened.
That happens. Huh.
Yeah, it was around the time that Kael passed away, I believe.
I mean, I had never heard about this actually, so
yeah,
that's interesting. Thank you.
And then, of course, one of the things that I think Bogdanovich dug up that was quite dramatically ironic was that in order to write her article, Kael had got in touch with, I think it was a colleague at UCLA who was a film studies professor who had himself done tons of research about Citizen Kane and its origin and how the script was written and so on. And she persuaded him to not write the book that he was about to write and to sell her his research. He did so, expecting that they were going to then collaborate on this piece together. Instead, she sent him the check, took his research, and came up with her own thing and published it without even mentioning his name.
Why would you sell someone your research?
I don't know, but he somehow she convinced him. He was shocked later.
To me, once I receive a check from someone and I have given them a bunch of stuff, like, I don't know, when does ownership transfer, right?
Right, yeah. I can imagine that was what was in her mind too, was like, well, great, now I own this.
Now I own this.
It's mine to do what I want with.
He should have got this in writing.
Yeah. But so apparently he he was not particularly pleased with her conclusions on his research. And of course, the dramatic irony I mentioned is that she had accused Wells of stealing Mancoats' writing and uncrediting him, and then it turns out she had done essentially the same thing in order to write her piece. Yeah,
just a parliament of devils here.
Yes. So, I guess aside from that, technically,
yeah. What did you think? I gave my piece, but you went to school for this.
No, that's true. I think, yeah, I'm largely with you. I think technically it's very good. There's a lot of stuff that's still very interesting. Like we talked a lot about the low angles.
Yeah, the low angles, the ceilings. Like people are framed unconventionally, in a way that I haven't seen a movie done like that in quite a long time. Where there's like, oh, something is both a long shot and a close up at the same time. Yeah, very deep. Actually, the last movie I saw like that was maybe Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino. He had particularly used like 70mm lenses, and because of that had done some very unusual framing with like it's such a wide format that you'd have like 6 actors all on screen at the same time, some in the foreground, some in the midground, some in the background, all of them in focus. Yeah, I feel like maybe Wes Anderson has done some stuff like that as well. Sure. That I can think of. I mean, like, this movie I was watching critically, not just watch it to, like, take it in. So, and this time I really noticed it. And those other movies, like, I've seen Hateful Eight, but I didn't notice it, but my brain did, as Red Letter Media says. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting, like, experimentation going on in this movie, and my understanding is that it had largely to do with Orson Welles having never directed a movie before. This was his first, successful creation for RKO, and it meant that he got to call the shots and come up with some pretty unusual ideas coming from the theater and radio background. Like you were, what were you telling me during the movie about his cinematographer, Toland? Yeah, hold on, I think I have a quote in here. You're gonna cut out this dead air, I hope. No, all of it. All of it. We're live. All of it's got to stay. Yeah, we've already got 1,000 listeners. Oh my God, I've never disappointed so many people at the same time. So I have a quote here from This Is Orson Welles, which is a series of interviews he conducted with Peter Bogdanovich, where he talks about Kane. He says, "You know how I happened to get to work with Greg? He was just then the #1 cameraman in the world, and I found him sitting out in the waiting room of my office. 'My name's Toland,' he said, 'and I want you to use me on your picture.' I asked him why, and he said he'd seen some of our plays in New York. He asked me who did the lighting. I told him in the theater most directors have a lot to do with it, and they used to back then. And he said, 'Well, fine. I want to work with someone who never made a movie.' And then he goes on to say in a later passage, he was quietly fixing it," referring to the lighting on set, because Orson had done a lot of the lighting, and then he goes on. "He was quietly fixing it so many of my notions as possible as work. Later he told me, 'That's the only way to learn anything from somebody who doesn't know anything.'" End quote. So whether that's true or apocryphal, of course, we'll never know, but it's a fascinating notion. I imagine that even the things that Orson Welles said true were also apocryphal. Yeah, I think he probably, punched him up a little bit. Yeah, so there was a lot of, unusual, especially with the cinematography techniques happening. The low angles, which required seeing the ceilings, which meant hiding lights everywhere, needing to have incredibly bright studio lights in order to account for the camera aperture being very narrow in order to get that deep focus. So I remember learning in school that just the actors were sweating it out every day. Sweltering. Yeah, in the studio lighting setup. But it worked. It looks very impressive in a number of scenes. There's a lot of really beautiful shots of the actors, surprisingly in darkness. Like their face is completely obscured, but these streaks of sunlight coming in through a skylight or a window or things like that. Yeah, the lighting is great. Right from, that first shot after the newsreel with everybody sitting in the dark room. Yeah, all you can see is really like the white of their shirts and cigarette smoke, which is really effective.
Yeah. I also thought it was cool how there's a lot of overlapping dialogue throughout the movie, which I don't believe was very common at the time. I could see that being something that Wells took from his theater background, but aside from Robert Altman's movies like MASH, I know was famous for using that overlapping dialogue. It just doesn't happen a lot because, of course, everybody wants to hear exactly what everybody's saying.
Right, yeah.
To understand the story. So as far as the tech goes in the movie, I would mention that it was nominated for 9 Oscar categories, which were Best Actor for Orson Welles, Art Direction Black and White, Cinematography, Directing, Film Editing, Music, Outstanding Motion Picture, Sound Recording, and Writing. And of that, it only got a single win, which was for Writing. And apparently...
What was the Best Picture that year?
So the Best Picture, ironically, I was going to mention, was John Ford for How Green Was My Valley. Oh. And he also won for directing for that same movie. And the reason I found that interesting was that...
Stagecoach?
Exactly, yes. Wells had to study up on filmmaking.
He just watched Stagecoach like 100 times?
Yeah, for a month.
Yeah.
Which was another of John Ford's movies. So the fact that he ended up losing to John Ford, I thought was quite funny. And I can imagine him not being particularly mad about that.
Fitting, too, right?
Yes.
It's like, I'm going to just watch Stagecoach 1 million times in the course of a month while I eat a whole pineapple and drink 2 entire bottles of scotch. And then, like, oh, okay, this guy who I learned film from has still bested me once again.
Mm-hmm. And then, for the writing win, I was amused that, so Wells was not present at the Oscars ceremony because he was busy shooting his next movie in Africa, I believe. And Mankiewicz, the co-screenwriter, had stayed home. And was listening to the show, to the ceremony on the radio. And so the head of RKO ended up having to accept the award for them. Yeah, so, you asked my opinion of the movie, and I think there's still a lot of interesting things to be gleaned from it if you are interested in the technique of making movies.
Yeah.
Although I agree that I don't know that the plot is as compelling anymore as it may have been.
That's the thing, like, best of all time, I don't know. There are things in culture that just kind of have an inertia to them that once they pick up something like that, it's hard to shake. And you don't want to be the guy, with the minority opinion, right? Of like, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
Certainly, again, one of the most influential movies ever made, but...
Yeah, that's easy to agree on. And, it launched a ton of careers. Most Orson Welles, obviously, most of the actors went on to a lot of things. The editor, Robert Wise, became famous in his own right for a number of movies.
Bernard Herrmann and Greg Toland all continued doing excellent work.
Oh, actually, that was another thing. I said it was nominated for music, which was by Bernard Herrmann. Citizen Kane lost to another movie composed by Bernard Herrmann.
Oh, okay. So that's a
that
win-win.
Same year. Yeah. But so, what you were saying was making me think of Shakespeare, who's often regarded as the greatest playwright of all time. And I feel similarly that Shakespeare has been incredibly influential and was certainly very skilled as a playwright, but I don't know that I've ever really connected with his plays in a way that would make me consider him to be the greatest playwright of all time.
Okay, well, that's fair. You haven't heard it in the original Klingon, but...
Well, that is true. Yes, excellent point. So, I guess the last thing that I would mention is that I appreciate particularly that Criterion decided to release this movie when they did, and as their first Laserdisc release, because, at the time, so this is 1984 was when they released it to begin with, and it was still in the position of being a critical success, and as I mentioned, had been top of the list in those Sight and Sound polls for a few decades, but wasn't necessarily enjoyed by the population at large, because at the time, home video...
I was going to say, is that an availability question?
Yeah, I think so. For most famous movies, you either saw it in the theater, or if you got lucky, you saw it on television. And for Citizen Kane, it was just kind of mostly gone for 10 years or so after its release until RKO sold its library off for television rights. And so it started coming on again, and then people started, kind of taking notice again. But so before Criterion released their home video release, your options were basically TV, which was probably based on a pretty crappy print, or seeing a pretty crappy print in person on like 16 millimeter. And that was, like the Laserdisc mentions, that it took a very long time before people were able to enjoy the movie that Orson Welles had intended them to see. And they did quite a bit of work on their release of, finding the best available print, and which was, they mention here, a fine-grained master positive provided by the UCLA Film and Television Archives. And that wasn't necessarily standard at the time for home video. And really, until film restorations became popular, it wasn't for many years. You'd see tons of crappy DVD releases and videotape releases and stuff like that. Fifth generation copies of movies that aren't necessarily the best way to watch them and appreciate them, at least.
Yeah, so like this release on Laserdisc was a big deal then for film buffs, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure film buffs in particular would have been interested in some of the extras, like...
Well, let's talk about those extras.
Well, so on my particular edition, which is the 50th anniversary edition that came a little later in 1991, it includes an interactive documentary called The Legacy of Citizen Kane, featuring interviews with 35 leading directors, actors, producers, and cinematographers from 1941 to today. It's also got a visual essay, which Laserdisc had this feature that you could, on certain types of discs called CAV, you could pause the movie, which was unusual for the time. Usually you would pause the movie and it would just go blank. But in this case, you could pause and actually go frame by frame through a movie. And they took advantage of this to include a lot of stills at the end of the movie, featuring, behind-the-scenes shots, storyboards, pictures of the script, stuff like that. And it's also got a short film by Orson Welles called Hearts of Age. That was a very early one for him. The original theatrical trailer. So this was their first attempt at giving people a larger experience at home than they could have gotten even at the movie theater.
Yeah, it's a good value add, it sounds like, too, because how much would a contemporary Laserdisc have been?
This release was $125.
Jiminy Cricket, really?
Yes.
And them's $1984.
$1991.
$1991.
Yeah,
God.
Let me check. The original release was, let's see, $89.95.
$89.95. Oh, wow. And then how much was a Laserdisc player from that time?
In the hundreds, easily.
Okay, so they really had to include something to get above and beyond the battered old VHS copy.
Yeah. Well, and even then, it's like, Laserdiscs had already been around for close to 10 years, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
And
this is the
just then they decided, hey, wait a minute, what if we added a little extra?
This is the second Laserdisc movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, what was the first?
Something about a robot.
Okay.
I don't remember. I was a kid. It was the 90s. There was time for clacks, and I was watching a story about a robot on Laserdisc at my friend's house.
Mm-hmm. That was also how I first saw Laserdisc. Was at my friend's house. They had Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, so I guess we'll wrap things up with the final question that I would like to ask of all of these films, which is based on Criterion's mission statement of releasing
which is
important classic and contemporary films from around the world.
You really spoon-fed me this answer by putting the emphasis on important, but go on.
Well, I think it's sort of, it's amusingly just a little bit pretentious.
I mean, it's a mission statement. I think some pretension is unavoidable.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say, based on that mission statement, this is undeniably an important film, and it deserves to be released. And it's telling that they thought so by making it their number one release that they ever put out.
Yeah, I would agree. And they, in fact, went on to release it 4 more times.
4 more times. So
yeah, so I will say thank you, Theron, for witnessing this first release with me and providing your input.
Thanks for having me.
everyone appreciates you listening, and we will be following this up soon with spine number 2 in the collection, King Kong.